The First Great Schism was one of the first splits between followers of the Jedi Order and those who refused to follow the Jedi's teachings. To its contemporaries, it was a conflict without name, and known as the Great Schism by the historians that followed. Eventually, the Second Great Schism occurred and necessitated referring to the initial conflict as the First. The First Great Schism took place in the year 24,500 before the Battle of Yavin. For over 10 millennia, a society of Force wielders had lived in relative peace on the deep core world of Tython, when they decided to relocate in order to step outside of the growing sphere of influence of the fledgling Galactic Republic. They had made their new home on Ossus in the Outer Rim. Already at this point, the Order had begun imposing rules within its practices, and to some, these were too rigid to allow growth. A young Jedi named Arden Lin was one such believer, and found a leader in fellow disgruntled Order member Zendor. Zendor had openly criticized what he perceived as the Order's increasingly exclusionary ways, limiting many practices and attempts at growth. Zendor initially petitioned the leaders of the Order to depart Ossus in order to create a new academy. There, he hoped to teach and study alternative traditions of the Force. The leaders of the Order refused Zendor's request, but he left in defiance, despite their decision. Zendor and Lin departed Ossus to establish their new academy on the planet of Latau. With time, larger and larger groups left Ossus, abandoning the Jedi Order to join Zendor's new group and study the mysteries of the Force that had been forbidden to them under the Order. Eventually, Zendor's followers would come to be known as the Legions of Latau. The newcomers to Zendor's academy pledged their allegiance to him and to the protection of their new order. They swore to defend their right to pursue knowledge of the Force without the oversight of the Jedi hierarchs, deeming them unfit to dictate which avenues were correct and which were forbidden. The Legions of Latau initially wished to be left alone by the Jedi, but the peace would not last. The Jedi Order branded the Legions as dissenters, and both sides began to arm themselves for the conflict that had become inevitable. The truth of which side began the war is lost to history, but one of the first battles was fought on the Jedi capital world, Ossus. Claiming to wish to end the conflict early and prevent it from spilling into the Republic, Zendor led the Legions in an attack on Ossus. Their attack failed, and the war continued unabated. Lin claimed millennia later that Zendor tried to alert the young Republic to the threat he believed the Jedi posed to them, claiming that the Jedi would guise themselves as protectors and guardians, while they secretly schemed for power. In this too, Zendor failed, and the Legions failed to gain any traction in the Republic against their Jedi enemies. The conflict spread across a number of worlds as it intensified. Eventually, Zendor would be engaged in combat with the Jedi Ordrista Pina, known by his nickname Green Blade, and was slain in single combat. Lin would later muse that both she and Zendor had admired Green Blade as a free thinker in his own right, one who preferred to travel to unknown places in search of mysteries of the Force, unknown to the Jedi Order. Ultimately, however, Green Blade believed that the order and structure that the Jedi represented were the foundations of civilization itself, so he stood with the Jedi Order rather than with Zendor. The Jedi forces commanded by Green Blade held a unique advantage over the Legions, which even Lin was forced to admit. Their dedication to the Order allowed them to subsume their individuality into a larger collective and fight as one, not unlike the Force ability known as Battle Meld, which allowed several Force users to draw upon each other's strength through the Force. Zendor's followers refused to embrace any such tactic, believing it insectile and an affront to individuality. Victory over Zendor, however, was not sufficient for the Jedi to declare victory in the war. Instead, forces under Green Blade were sent to Latau to attempt to exterminate the last of Zendor's followers. A fierce battle was fought, allowing just enough time for the last survivors of the Legions to flee beyond the boundaries of Republic space. Lyn was eventually cornered by Greenblade after fleeing into regions of space unknown to all but Zendor. Lyn and Greenblade engaged in a duel, in which Lyn was disarmed. Unwilling to concede defeat, Lyn channeled her strongest emotions, rage and sorrow, love for Zendor, and despair over what she believed had been unfairly taken from them, through the Kashimir talisman she wore, an artifact from the ancient Kashimir dynasty. She succeeded in destroying Greenblade's sword and mortally wounding him in the process. In his dying breaths, he drew on his own unique force talent, Morikro, to defeat Lyn. The spell, in essence, placed her into a deep stasis. She would not be resuscitated until the era of the Great Jedi Purge, over 24,000 years later. After that, the Jedi Order withdrew back to Ossus in the Great Schism's aftermath. Thereafter, few in the core worlds gave the Jedi much thought. Though unbeknownst to them, the Jedi acted as the Republic's secret defenders on the Rim. They would not declare themselves to the Republic until nearly 500 years later.